Greetings to episode 6 of Pro Am Beach Soccer's podcast. This week's guest, we're very happy and very proud to have Carli Boutsianis. Carli is an ex-SoccerRoo for the Australian national team, as well as being a longtime professional player in the Australian Premier Division. During that time and continuing on, he has developed a methodology over the last 20 years for developing players, focused on using different types of tools, including a grading system for beginners, semi-pros, and professionals that can kind of gauge where they're at in their development and helping them to get better. Carli is once known as the David Beckham of Australian soccer because of his skills in regards to hitting the free kick and scoring plenty of goals that way. And that has led him to really focus on the technical biomechanics. Now, that's not something you're going to hear in the soccer world too much these days, but he focuses on the technical biomechanics, centering around the body and the methodology in regards to scoring more goals, which is what this game is all about, whether we're talking about beach soccer or grass soccer. And really happy to have you here today. Also wanted to mention, you have a little bit of a background having worked with Carli Lloyd of the U.S. national team and helping her. Could you mention a little bit about your experience working with Carli as we start, Con?
Yeah, thanks, Ty, for the introduction. It's very nice of you. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I basically coached Carli a few times before she actually went to the Beijing Olympics. And a friend of mine, James Galanis, who runs Universal Soccer Academy, he invited me to come and help her to improve her shooting skills and her ability to score goals. And it was a great experience. Just visiting the US, it's such a great place. Incredible amount of players playing soccer there. I think it was around, they told me 20 or 21 million people or players playing in America, and that's the whole population of Australia. So that's a lot of kangaroos.
It is.
They say there's more kangaroos in Australia than people. So yeah, we worked on some specific areas and to help her understand what type of shots she should be taking. Some of the shots she wasn't aware of. When I say she wasn't aware of, she wasn't taking appropriate shots. And when I say, when you get into certain situations to score a goal, the ball may be doing a lot of different things. It may be bouncing, it may be coming to your opposite foot. And that's another area that we do focus a lot on. And I just have to break down the mechanics and the actual technique. And because I was a technical player, I thought it was all about technique. But, to actually strike a ball correctly or in the shooting phase or the passing phase, your mechanics have to be correct. And when we talk about mechanics, it may be the way you place your foot, it may be the way you swing your arm, it may be the way you position your hips, it may be the way you follow through when you kick the ball. There's so many variables to actually being accurate. And what I did notice is that as a sport, we spend a lot of time doing maybe unnecessary things and not focusing on the basic skills. And I think shooting the ball is not just about shooting. It actually can define a pass, it can define a cross, it can define a lot of things when you're playing the game. So hence, having worked with Carli, she ended up scoring winning goal in the Beijing Olympics. She's last World Cup, I think she scored another 3 or 4 goals. Yeah. So she's still scoring, and I think she's nearly 40 odd now. She's 38 or 39, so still scoring goals. And the thing is, once you learn a particular technique, you tend not to lose it. You know how to do it, and it's about forming the mechanics and the shot selection and then repeating it until it becomes automated in your brain. And then when it happens in a game, like we see many top top athletes in any sport, it doesn't look like they're trying too much because it's been developed over many, many years. So then it's easy for them to execute when they're under pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of actually rolls right into talking about shooting on sand. The correlation of technical skills needed. From what we're looking at. I mean, also want to be clear that beach soccer isn't exactly your background per se, but you've had
Yeah.
kind of an affinity for watching it. And um, before we go into that, can you actually talk a little bit about that? I mean, when we got into the conversation and decided to do this, it was really a scenario where we were kind of bouncing off each other a lot, which gave us the idea of you coming and being one of our guests. And I just wanted to kind of a little bit of skipping ahead, but like, what was it about the beach soccer when you've been watching it that gave you the idea or gave you the feeling that this was something that was, really good for player development?
Well, obviously we came across and made the relationship through the course of Soccer X. So
Yeah.
um, I'm not an avid expert like yourself. I've never coached on the sand,
Hmm.
but what I do see is that if you know how to strike a ball, you pretty much know on the sand or barefoot. Sorry, barefoot more or less. Then you actually understand how to strike a ball properly. And my line of thinking was that if you don't kick it properly, then you injure yourself. So with a boot, generally, or a cleat, as they say in the US, you can sort of get away with it sometimes, unless you actually stub your toe really hard into the grass,
Yeah.
which can be sometimes easy to do, but sometimes it can happen. But on the sand, when you're barefoot, having played volleyball as well, I understood when I was digging the ball, it was the same thing because it was hitting on the bare skin, and the skin would become like red raw, almost like it stings when it
Hmm.
actually hits. But if you've done it over a period of time, your brain recognizes that feeling, and then it doesn't hurt as much. It actually becomes a good feeling. You understand when you hit the sweet spot that you're hitting the ball correctly. So I think that's the main correlation that I see, that you should be able to hit a ball off the sand. Then when you're kicking on the grass, it should be very easy.
Yeah.
And I did practice it with one of my students once. She was actually a bit sore, her feet were a bit sore, and I said, just take your boots off and just, because she had a few blisters at the back of her heel, so that's common. And I said, just take your shoes off. And so she started hitting some balls with um, with no cleats on, and she did well. But she'd obviously been through the process of developing her technical skills and hit a lot of balls. So yeah, the other thing that I liked, like, I don't watch, to be honest, I haven't watched a lot, but when I do watch it, I think it's interesting because I do see incredible goals being scored on the sand. It's just amazing, especially when they're doing their scissor kicks and their side volleys. And, obviously the pace of the game is different. It's a different pace. It's still physically very demanding, but obviously it's not getting played along on the sand because the ball bobbles up too much. But when it comes to executing and shooting, those guys are incredible.
Yeah,
You
I
see
believe
some.
in a previous conversation we were discussing that a little bit about like um it's not that it's an anomaly that you can find players that hit balls the way that guys do in the sand, but it's sort of like it's a rare player that is able to take the ball in an 11-a-side grass game and take it out of the air the way that you see it almost commonplace on the sand.
Mm,
And that really intrigued me when you talked about it, because I did recognize, I recognize that. And I believe it probably comes from the repetition, like you're talking about, because of beach soccer being in such an enclosed area. and so much of it coming off of set pieces and things like that, that players are getting those repetitions and being able to strike the ball in ways that you just don't really see in a large amount, I guess you would say, in the grass game, the game that we love and cherish all of our lives now. So what do you think is the difference in regards to the beach players and the way that they prepare? Like, and I'm just asking an opinion, but um, being a rare player on the grass, why is it that beach players are able to take that to a different level, do you think?
The actual shooting, you're saying?
Yeah, because we were talking about, like, you're talking about the scissors and the overhead
Yeah.
kicks and everything. And when we were talking before, it was like they're always on target, or there's so much more often, getting those opportunities and getting on target. But guys on the grass, they do get in positions where they could finish a ball like that, but it's like you were saying to me before, it's a bit of a rare commodity to be able to have a player that had that sort of talent.
Well, it's obvious. I mean, most skills are learnable anyway.
Hmm.
You just have to practice them and just break them down. And those scissor kicks and that, they're not easy because your landing is very important. Obviously, you don't want to land and hurt yourself on the grass. And you have to know when to drop the arm and when the other arm comes down, but you also have to make impact at the right time. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think the timing of it is more important than anything else. If you don't know how to time it, then you're sort of going to miss the ball. But a
Yeah.
lot of the sand, if you watch when they're actually taking shots, they see a shot and they don't waste the time. But in normal grass pitch soccer, the tactics have changed. I don't think they would have changed a lot in sand. The tactics on grass soccer is about keep on passing the ball and almost trying to walk it in. And when the ball comes in a flight mode, most players don't see the opportunity to score the goal. And in flight mode, when the ball's in the air, you can develop instant power, more power than off the grass. So, and you can also take the goalkeeper by surprise, more or less, because they don't see that coming.
Yeah.
So there's very few players on the grass when you see them. I think it was Jean-Pierre Papin. He was probably a lot of people might not recognise or know who he
I,
is, but
I know who he is.
he was a French player that played for, I think, PSG, I'm not sure, or Marseille, and then went to AC Milan in the 80s. He got sold for something like 20 million US back then, which was huge. It would probably be worth 80 or 100 now.
Hmm.
And he was very adept at taking the shot early. And a lot of players want to control the ball first before they go on to take the shot. And I think on sand, you don't have the time. You'd prefer to not be bobbling around the sand. And I
Yeah.
think it lends itself more to hitting more balls in the air. And it's
Hmm.
easier to hit a ball in the air than for it to be running along the sand, and then you sort of might be in a ditch and you might miscue the shot. I think that's why they maybe mount the ball up a bit high on the sand when they take the free kick. So it's like a tee shot in golf. It's
Right.
easier to hit. So that may lend itself a little bit for that reason to hit more balls in the air, but they still are difficult. And I think, like I said before, it comes down to being specific with a particular shot. Say if you want to learn a particular shot, we just say we isolate that particular shot and we say, okay, let's repeat it 10, 20, 50 times until you get it right, and then you become fluent with it. And that's why with my company, we developed a grading system, because when we go to execute a particular skill, we don't necessarily understand if we're doing it right or wrong, or we don't actually get marked a particular way to know where we're really at. Like how good I am at shooting the ball with side spin, for example, or with top spin. And the only way to be able to do that is if you test for certain things and then you get a mark and then you see what your mark is, and then you go back to the skill and you try and improve it. And there's so many random things happening in soccer. There's so many variables that you sort of don't know where to start. And a lot of people want to play a lot of matches, but when it comes to the basic skills, they don't have the basic skills to perform. And with a grading system, at least from a beginner's or semi-professional or professional point of view, we can pinpoint exactly where they're at. And of course, professional players maybe not need as much work in certain areas, but believe me, when you get to the high level, it's like, if we can use the analogy of Usain Bolt, if he was running 9.7 or whatever the world record was, for him to take 0.01 off his time, he would have to work extremely hard. And when you're at the top, sort of everyone's around the same level. To be even better, you have to keep on working hard. And the relevance of that is the end product. It's like in golf, you can do very well getting up to the green, you can pitch onto the green, but if you can't putt, then you can't win.
You can never win.
Yeah. It doesn't work. And like the saying is, you drive for show and putt for dough. And in football, it's the same. And I think maybe some grass players may learn some things from playing beach, and beach may learn some things from playing on grass. I think we can never stop learning, and there's always, it's a round ball, it's the same thing, and we're trying to score more goals than the opposition.
Right.
But I think we believe that certain players are born with this particular instinct to score. They may have some instinct and maybe some natural talent, but really it's developed over many, many years. Ibrahimovic was a fine example. He said one of his coaches at the end of I think it was in Sweden, he said he told him that after practice he would sit for half an hour just practicing shooting, while everyone else had left.
Cristiano Ronaldo was the same way.
Ronaldo still does that, but a lot of people, we do have not a problem, but a lot of sports scientists believe they don't want to load the players up with shooting a lot. But if you don't load them up when they get into certain situations when they're older and they need to run for 90 minutes on the grass pitch, and then they need to fire a shot in the last minute, they don't have the strength to do it,
right,
or the know-how to do it. And so we have to develop that area of the game much more than what we are, because there's only a handful of players that we see around the world that are generally scoring the goals. The other ones we just say, oh no, they're the only ones that should be passing it. But in other sports like basketball, every single player shoots or knows how to shoot. There's no excuse for that. And I know golf is an individual sport, but our sport's really individual too. We see it as a team sport. It is a team sport entirely. But every time a player receives a ball, it's up that player to interpret what he's going to do or what she's going to do with that ball using their individual skill. It's not a team skill now. And if I make an error, that affects the team. Of course, we know it affects the team, but that's why we need to individualize segments of the game and make sure that the basics are perfected, and then you can move on to more complex things. They're the findings, and based on a lot of data that I've had, which is interesting, that some 8-year-old kids in a particular club, we tested some 8-year-olds and we tested some 10-year-olds and 12, 14, and then up to 18 years of age. Some 8-year-olds were testing just as good as some 12-year-olds. And some 12-year-olds were testing just as good as some 16-year-olds.
Yeah.
So if we went to school and we said that, a 9-year-old kid had to know the alphabet, or say a 6 or 7-year-old kid had to know the alphabet and know how to count to 100, that was the standard for a 7-year-old, then that's the standard in the school. Yet in football, we don't really have a curriculum or a syllabus that we can look at, that's something tangible in our hands, and say, oh, okay, how come the 8-year-old kid is doing better than the 12-year-old kid? If that was happening in school, the parent would be mortified and say, hang on a second, my kid doesn't know the alphabet and he's already in grade 3. and all the other kids know it, why not? In soccer, you see, say, the 9-year-old kid maybe doing better than a 12-year-old kid and running rings around the 12-year-old kid, but the 12-year-old kid's never learned how to pass the ball correctly, never learned how to control the ball correctly, but just focused on playing games a lot of the time. And I think we have to educate. America's a huge market. We have to try and educate the coaches, the players, the parents, because we sort of want instant results. And I liken it to the parents actually sitting in the classroom. When they go to watch a match, they're intensely watching over, they're giving a lot of instruction to their kids, putting them under enormous pressure. They wouldn't be doing that in school. They wouldn't be sitting in the classroom saying, little Johnny, how come you didn't get that one right?
Yeah.
Yes. So, and the kid who's 10 years of age in primary school, we call here in Australia, high school, I think you get a high score at about
13,
11 or 12. Yeah.
13 and
11 or
about.
12 here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're expecting these kids now to move into a field where there's a lot of probabilities and there's a lot of skills that you have to learn to play it at a very good level. So if we were in school, we're expecting that kid now to be the doctor now.
Mm-hmm.
Their brains haven't developed enough. Their skills haven't developed. They need more time, and they need to be able to actually go home. And we stress a lot of homework, that once you come and do a session with me, you've got homework. You've got
Yeah.
school homework. You finish
And
your school homework,
you
then
got
you've
your
got
football.
soccer homework. And if you do your soccer homework, then you're going to remember when you come back next for another session that we can move on to the next level. But what happens is that they never really learn anything tangible that they're under pressure to learn. So if they got 1 out of 10 for passing the ball with the left foot with the outside of the foot, say example, which you have to learn how to pass with both feet, they may be doing it at 10%. But did they go home and practice that so in order to come back and then that skill all of a
Increase their
sudden is at
score.
60 or 70%? So it's a whole educational process. And I think we have to take those measures, not for everyone to be the superstar. They don't have to be a superstar, just at least so they can enjoy the game and then have fun. And if they want to take it to the next level, you have to work harder.
Absolutely.
So simple.
No, I can't disagree more. I mean, I've actually in the past, we used to keep a lot of different statistics for players and be able to basically go through a season and grade them. You know, not exactly. I don't not nearly probably as technical as you, but that opportunity for them to see themselves improving from the beginning to the end, and being able to have that satisfaction of understanding that they have been able to grasp more aspects of the game. I mean, here in the U.S., I mean, obviously we miss a lot of the cultural parts. And as you were talking about that, I was having flashbacks to a video about Ajax. It was Clivert, I think, was like a 14-year-old or something in this video, and it was talking about how when they go to the club, the parents aren't allowed to speak, and if they are, they're told if they continue to do so, then their child will be asked to leave Ajax. And that's counterintuitive here in the US. We just, you know, a lot of times the parents are the ones that are making impacts behind the scenes and putting pressure on coaches, because, you know, everyone's the next Diego Maradona here. So I was having all sorts of flashbacks as you were talking about that, you know, from my 30 plus years of coaching on the grass here as well. But I wanted to kind of shift gears because you mentioned something earlier in regards to with the beach soccer in shooting, and it reminded me of an analogy you made in differences between beach and grass, and you made the analogy with tennis. Yes. And I don't know if you remember that. It was like talking about like when you've got two great tennis players, they're not waiting for that opportunity to, you know, hit the extra volley. They're looking to strike as quickly as possible. And with beach soccer, you know, as we're talking about this developmental aspects, you're getting a shot every 30 seconds in beach soccer on average. And it kind of goes to that, what you're talking about, that as you're being tired in the sand and you're trying to take every chance that you can get. And you were talking about tennis, where it's if the ball's hit to you, they're not wasting time. It's like there's that opportunity to score and you take it. And so we were talking about like the goalkeeper's throws and players taking it out of the air and striking it on goal. And I was really energized by the way that you were talking about that before, because it was just like you kind of lit up as we are talking about. And then when you brought up tennis, I was like, wow, that's a great analogy.
Well, I think just so I don't forget, sorry, one of my, because I coached various players and females and males and young kids and professional players. I've coached players who've gone to World Cups. I enjoy the process. So you're teaching the same thing. It just ends up becoming faster or stronger. It's not, we're all learning the alphabet. What we do with it, it's up to everyone else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To continue on from there. And that's why I try and stress to parents or coaches and say, look, there's no alphabet. How do you expect them to then go spell words? They're gone. They get into the field and then you're expecting them to think like these world champions. Those guys are incredible players, but there's a relevance between, say, the female and the male player. I found that a lot of the female players that I've worked with are a little bit more mature than the boys initially, right? So they're easier to take instructions. Sometimes the boys are not. So we all, as coaches, we have to find different ways of helping everyone. And in relation to tennis, what happened is that one of my good friends is one of the best coaches here in Australia. He's coaching a young girl, and her mind and the female's mind is very different to the male mind. And when she was practicing and hitting rallies, when there was a short ball, and we say when there's a short ball in tennis, you've got to step into that ball and you've got to hit it for a winner when it's there to be hit.
Yeah.
But she was just keeping it in play. And he says, you just missed the opportunity, and then allow the other girl to come back into the point to win the point. So he had to teach her more mental to say, no, when you see a short ball, you've got to try and hit that winner. It doesn't matter if it doesn't go in, but you've got to try and hit the winner there. That's where the opportunity lies. And whether you're playing soccer or beach soccer or whatever, when there's an opportunity, you must take it. And as you say in beach soccer, maybe it's you see more action, the goals, because as soon as they see it, they're just thinking, I'm going to score here. I'm not going to waste my time. And I think on grass, the tactics have changed enormously. We've got this new rule where you can play it inside the box and you can have 2 defenders or 3 defenders in there with a goalkeeper. And you see them coughing the ball up or losing the ball inside the box. I mean, personally, I wouldn't take that risk. I was saying, why would you want to take that risk? And when they get into the front third, they're not prepared to take a shot. They're prepared to make an extra pass when the shot's available.
Right.
Yet they're prepared to take the biggest risk, taking a goal kick. Why? You don't need to take that risk. So we have to use diverse ways. You can still play a long ball and be effective. It doesn't, we go back to England and say, oh, we're just knocking long ball and we don't play a good brand of football. Don't get me wrong, you see some of the world's best teams, they're knocking 50, 60-yard balls. I mean, Manchester City just played in the Champions League against PSG, I think it was this morning, and the goalkeeper put one of the players through past the halfway line and they went on to score. That was the move. The goalkeeper put him through.
Yeah.
So, and Pep Guardiola obviously is a great coach. They're always evolving because to keep the opposition at bay, the opposition always studying what the champions are doing, but the champions always thinking, well, how can I do this better, or how can I change it so that the opposition don't get used to us?
Right.
You don't want them to get used to it. But I can tell you one thing from my experience: you can never ever stop someone who's a good shooter. He'll always find a way to put it in the back of the net.
Yeah.
Always. And Michael Jordan was a fine example of, you tried to double team him, triple team him, and the guy had answers for everything. He'd jump over the 7-foot guy. He could shoot from anywhere. As for Stephen Curry, who's probably the most extraordinary shooter in the world.
Our local boy here.
Yeah, yeah,
West
because
Coast.
the guys, yeah, the guys, just incredible. Like when you talk about shooting, people don't understand that you watch him, or even when he's training. I see him training, and I watch particularly in all sports, so I can learn something. Is the fluidity and the rhythm that he creates, and shooting is about fluency and rhythm, creating rhythm. And if you don't repeat it enough times, you can't create the rhythm. We don't, as a nation, I think our premier clubs, they spend, I don't know, not much time on shooting. One of the guys, one of the players I knew, they were spending 20 minutes or half an hour a week shooting a week. That's not enough. Like a
That's crazy.
basketball player is practicing minimum half an hour of shooting a day, I would say. They're hitting 500 hoops a day minimum to
Yeah,
keep the rhythm up. So then when they get into the situation, they're not thinking about what shot they're going to make. They're thinking about how they're going to get past. They're thinking about tactics because they can think about that. But what we tend to do is tend to teach them too much tactics when they don't have a skill set. Tactics are easier when you've got more skills.
right.
It's a
Yeah,
fact.
no,
But if,
absolutely.
yeah,
I
that's,
nobody can argue that. I mean,
no,
it's absolute, and that's actually one of the things that I've come to appreciate about beach soccer so much is is the fact that you're getting the opportunity to shoot so much more often. It's why I'm such a big proponent of it as a way of player development. Because, like we said, there's a shot every 30 seconds, and the field, half field is 20 yards. I mean, you're still inside the center or inside the penalty box circle, when you're
yeah,
taking that shot from half field. So you can literally shoot from anywhere, and, and you're shooting off an uneven surface. So there's that sort of, I think we talked about it. It's like so often with players that haven't had the opportunity of getting those repetitions in, their mind is going 1,000 miles an hour when that ball is in the position for them to shoot, and they're having to think about so much. They start thinking about so much that you know they don't end up actually being able to slow the game down. And
mm,
the thing about getting repetition on sand is the ball is continuously going in and out of these holes. It goes in the valley, comes up on the tip, and as a shooter, you have to actually slow the game down because you have to see it coming out of that hole to be able to hit it on the top of a ridge. And I found, even for myself, now getting almost near 50 years old, that
yeah,
I'm a much better shooter now when playing grass, with all of almost 2 decades of being able to be in the sand. Granted, time makes it easier, and experience, but the transition of being able to see things um, in a different speed, because I was always someone that my mind was always a few steps ahead of my feet. And with the sand, it's really been able to create a scenario where that has reversed itself. And
mm,
now, as a ball comes in the air to me, or it's bouncing, or even better, even easier, rolling, there's not as much of a tendency to mishit it. And on top of that, with the sand, because we were talking about, like, you early on, you were talking about, you could stub your toe, in a boot. But with
yeah,
sand, we've got that. I think I told you about, like, the analogy with hitting someone. Like, if you're gonna punch somebody, you're not going to use, or if you're going to hit somebody, you're not
yeah,
going to hit them with a flat hand. It's just too, like,
yes,
whatever. So you make a fist. And with your feet in the sand, one of the first things, and I've been doing this lately with my grass team since COVID is happening, we can't rent grass fields. We've been hopping onto them once in a while, but the sand's always there. So I've been taking my grass team out in the sand. And the first thing I teach them is, when you're going to hit a ball, curl your toes underneath so that your big toe doesn't drag and you don't get turf toe. And
yeah,
then when you go back to the grass, keep your toes curled when you strike the ball, because it's going to give you more strength in your locked ankle. It's going to be more consistent, and you're going to hit the ball much more true than before, because most players are not taught to actually strengthen their ankle, and everyone's taught to lock their ankle. They're all told lock the ankle, but most players I see, they're going through and they're striking with toes straight, and there's much more opportunity for you to lose that lock, for a lack of
Yeah.
a better description, than if you actually, once you get your toes locked in there, it's always going to be the same, no matter if the ball's in the air, if it's baby bounces, if
Yeah.
it's in the garbage. So um, I I know that we had talked about that, but something else that you had mentioned to me, and it wasn't as much about the ankle and the foot. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, all of that needs to be, that's all part of the biomechanics that needs to happen. But talking about the power coming from the hips, and I don't think that that's something that people really think about. It's always like the quad, or making sure your
Yeah.
quads are strong enough, and making sure your hamstrings are built up. But that body mechanics of getting through the ball, and many times looking to land on your shooting foot,
Mm.
which you don't see in the US a whole ton of a lot. And
Well, it can be misinterpreted. I don't think everyone's got the answers, but I think if you break it down, when you actually shoot, I usually use my hand. So if you can see here, the toes are there, and then the ball usually ramps up.
yeah.
So I always say we have to tuck the toes underneath. So then you get this part of the foot. That's where the action is. That's where the power is. And
Hmm.
the more we do that, the stronger the ankle joint becomes.
Yeah.
But for that to happen, see, my elbow may be my knee, and then my knee locks in, and then my hip locks in. So the actual movement now, when I lock everything into position, the actual driving wheel or steering wheel, sorry, is actually coming from the hip.
Hmm.
That's where the power is. That's where the power is anything. Whether you throw something mechanically, it all comes from the hip. I'd be throwing a discus, it's coming from the hip,
Right.
right? I
Yeah.
can be doing a squat, and they say, yeah, you got to keep your stomach tight, because your stomach, your transverse abdominal muscles, which are linked, really deep inside your stomach, hold
Yeah.
you up, and it's, all that region there is what holds everything together, and that's where you get the power from. But having studied a fair bit on it, in all the sports, whether it's rugby, whether it's American gridiron, the kicking aspect, if you don't do it repeatedly, then you're never ever going to create enough strength. But you don't. It's like a wire. It's the more you do it, it creates a strength and a tension, and the chemical that it's a bit technical, but it's a chemical that we have in our body called myelin, and the more we repeatedly do something, the stronger it becomes. It's not a power. It's not doing weights and all this type of stuff. It's just about repetition, like a tennis forearm. You see tennis players, their forearms are massive. It's not because they were in the gym doing it. It's because they've hit millions and millions of balls.
Yeah.
And then the most important thing is, once you repeat it a lot of the time, you've actually got now a really, really strong shot, whether it be in tennis, soccer, or obviously we're talking about soccer, is that when you go to hit it now, you can actually take the tension off. So if you want to hit 100% power, it should be going like a bullet. But you see some players, they hardly even swing, and they get a lot of power.
Yeah.
That's because of the repetition. And until we understand that, it's never going to happen. And unfortunately, we have a lot of sports scientists who say we don't want to load people up. Well, use a lighter ball, so you don't use a heavier ball. And we
Hmm.
have to look at different ways of becoming better. There can't be only one way. I mean, you can play as an athlete, whether you're playing beach soccer, whether you're playing on the grass, whether you're playing tennis, or whether you're playing basketball, gridiron, anything, all the mechanics are very similar. If you're
Yeah.
fluent and well balanced and coordinated, you should be able to play nearly every sport.
Hmm.
But the reason we can't is because of the mechanics. It's not really the technique initially. The technique can be learned, but it's the mechanical movements. And if we don't repeat them and hold the same position, we can't get the same result. We get random results.
Hmm.
So, I don't want to make it too technical. It's not that difficult to understand, for the viewers, but I firmly believe that, like we discussed before, hitting barefoot really shows me if you can hit the ball properly.
Right.
Um, it does. Of course, if you're, um, we have obviously on the grass, we have half volleys. I don't think you're hitting the half volley too much. I'm not sure. I mean, the ball may bobble up in the sand and it becomes more sort of a volley, but in soccer, we have a lot of shots that are half volleys. But
Hmm.
we don't look at the half volley, reverse spin, half volley, forward spin, half volley just hitting through the middle. There's so many variations just to a half volley, because then I can strike it with full power. So this is tucking the toes underneath, but I can also hit a half volley with the inside of the foot or the
Mm-hmm.
instep, however you may call it, because everyone calls it, uses a different terminology for it. But we don't practice, say, a normal half volley. So when the ball's bouncing, we see all sorts of things when the player goes to strike the ball, and you can see it immediately. They're not
Yeah.
used to hitting that particular ball. You can tell they're thinking about it. The moment you're thinking about it, okay, maybe they haven't really practiced it enough.
Yeah.
So uh, coming back to the shooting bit, which you know if if you see some players, some of the world's best players, how they manipulate the ball, if you don't know how to manipulate the ball with spin, like in table tennis, like in tennis, if you
Hmm.
don't understand how the ball works with spin, you're not going to be able to execute correctly. All you're
Hmm.
doing is just hitting and hoping. You may get one, but you're not going to be consistent. And a fine example, and that's what we try to get with Carli, is to get her into positions where she knew exactly what she had to do. And the goalkeeper, the goalkeeper's under a lot more pressure when you're coming up against a player who's got variations in their shots.
Yeah.
If you've got
Makes
variations,
sense.
like you say in beach soccer, you can do a side volley, you can do a
I
you can
kick.
do a bicycle kick. You can do many different types of kicks, and the ones in the air are obviously more difficult. And in grass soccer, that doesn't happen as often. It just doesn't.
Well, especially in
But
this day and age.
in this day and age, yes. But if it does happen, then you should be prepared for it. You shouldn't
Hmm.
be second guessing it. And it's like what Tiger Woods said. He would put a golf ball into the sand pit that was really wet, because sometimes it'd rain and the ball, say they hit a 9-iron high into the air and it dropped into the sand, it would drop halfway into the sand because it had been raining. If it was dry, it'd sit on the top of the sand, more or less.
Hmm.
Now, to hit that shot where you're hitting half the ball that's dug into the sand as opposed to sitting just above the sand is a completely different shot. And he said that it may happen one time in a million times that he's playing. It may happen 2 or 3 times in his whole career, but he said if it ever happened, I was prepared for that shot. Now that's taking it to the extreme, and we want everyone, I mean, this doesn't have to be about just professional players, it's about people who just want to enjoy themselves. But I don't see how you can enjoy yourself if you don't know the basic skills. I
Yeah.
can't see. If I'm playing tennis with you and you can't hit the ball over the net, I know I'm not going to have a good time, because I want to have at least a few shots over the net, so we can get into some rallies and enjoy the game. So,
Right.
and it's the same with a skill set, whether it's on beach soccer or grass soccer. The more skills we develop, the more we enjoy the game.
Well, that was one of the things that had talked about was I had brought up the fact that, especially here in the US, over the last, more or less 15 years, maybe 20, the whole craze in regards to the tiki-taka, Barcelona method,
Yeah,
nothing to take away from the beauty of it. As I mentioned, I've studied Spanish football since the early 90s, and it's always been sort of my foundation, having gone to Real Madrid in the summers, for a decade, and watching so much Spanish football. I've watched more of that than anything else. But having said that, as it became popular here, after I'd already kind of experienced it, this emphasis of keeping the ball on the ground and playing the rondos, which obviously is fundamental for being able to play possession in tight spaces and such. But what we've seen and I've heard far too often on the fields as I've continued to be involved in coaching grass are coaches that have emphasized keeping the ball on the ground, not looking for even the long switch and the switching at the point of attack. In many cases, they want to, play it through the midfield and keep the ball in possession. And it's funny because you take that aspect and then they say, if in doubt, kick it out, which normally is putting it in the air. Or and going back to what we're talking about in regards to shooting and finishing, you get into the final third and they're hitting crosses in the air because they're under pressure and they're just trying to put it in play, but they're not getting that sort of repetition out of training. So that's one of the things that I also I appreciate about being able to expose especially younger players to beach soccer, because everything has to be played more or less out of the air. Granted, when players first learn, they're just trying to dribble through the sand, and maybe they learn how to flick pass and using their three small toes to kind of lift it up and dribble that way as well, which is advantageous. But the thing about beach soccer is that whether it's a throw-in, a corner kick, a kickoff, these are all things that are indirect plays that turn into shots in the air. And as you're able to put these players in these positions, it actually lends itself to what you're saying of being in a situation more often because of the size of the pitch, so that when they go back to the grass and that flighted ball is approaching them, they're more comfortable with it because it's part of what beach is. And it's sort of like these days, especially in the last decade here, futsal has become everybody's favorite flavor. And it's amazing for getting a lot of touches and keeping the ball on the ground, since it's a weighted ball, and it does help with players tremendously. But I'm also a firm believer that there is that balance between keeping that ball on the ground and being able to, going to what you said, vary the ways that you attack a team as well. Whereas it's also a player that can finish with a multitude of different weighted or spinning finishes, strikes. Even in a team concept of getting into that final third, is a player going to surprise someone by having developed these three small toes and they scoop between two defenders in a position where somebody can finish on a volley? Or it creates sort of a different way of looking at the game for younger players that creates more imagination. And you have to be able to finish out of the air if you're playing in the sand. And there's so few players these days that are being able to do that on the grass, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
But I agree. I agree with what the coaches say. I'm not disagreeing that you have to play the ball along the ground. That's common sense.
Yes,
and
of course.
That's common sense. On the grass, you play it along the ground. The thing is, the reason why they're playing it along the ground is because you're making it easier for your teammate to receive the ball, and you can move like a chess piece, like a team efficiently. The
Yes,
thing
of
is,
course.
when you start coming up against better opposition, they're not going to let you easily pass your way through. So you've got to have a diverse range of skills now. So you may have to scoop the ball up. You may have to chip it slightly up. You may have to knock a long ball 50 or 60 meters. You may have to knock it just off the ground so the defender can't get it at pace. The problem there is the control at speed. So if I'm passing the ball through to someone, that player is now running at speed, but then he has to control at speed, so then there's no interception. That's where they get stuck. Of course, I agree with what they're saying, but you want to take it to that next level. That ball has to be delivered so much harder and has to be delivered at different heights.
Hmm.
It's just
Yeah,
the way it is. The tennis player comes to the net, you got to lob him sometimes. You can't hit through him all the times because he's too sharp at the net, for example.
for
Right?
sure.
And so that's why it's important to not only know how to pass on the ground, not only you look at Lionel Messi, he's lobbing the ball over the front in players, 2 or 3 players trying to put someone through. And the
Yep.
reason why they lob it over someone's head is because it's unstoppable. No one can be, 8 feet or 9 feet. The ball's lobbing over you. That's why we lob it over a goalkeeper, or that's why we use top spin and side spins so the goalkeeper can't get it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
whether I mean, what's the essence of a scissor kick? How does a scissor kick, which is the most difficult strike of a ball in midair, score a goal against the goalkeeper who may be 6'1" or 6'4"? How does that happen? It's because the top spin, it comes
Mhm.
towards the goalkeeper, right? And it's maybe about a meter over his head. And by the time it gets over his head, it's dipping into the goal.
Yeah.
That's top spin. So that's why they score. And if the scissor is available, like, I don't know if you remember Hugo Sanchez. He used to play for
Oh
Real
yeah.
Madrid. It was
Real Madrid,
yeah,
Mexican national. Absolutely.
Mexican. So he was one of my favorite players, and I remember a distinct quote from Leo Benhacker, who was a Dutch coach. He coached Real Madrid, and he was coaching that team. And they interviewed him after a game, and Sanchez has just scored the most unbelievable scissor kick. I think it was in around the 30th minute of the game. He was a left footer, Jean,
Mm.
and it was just inside the box. So it wasn't really close. It was just inside. So it was a good 15 meters out, or 16, 17 yards, or whatever it was. And they interviewed Leo Bernhack, and they said, "What did you think about the goal?" And he said, at that particular moment, he said, "We should have stopped the game and gone home, because it was the most beautiful goal he's ever seen." And the thing is, it's unstoppable. And when you see scissor kicks, when you see side scissor kicks, when you see, there's some of the most exciting, it makes you want to watch the game. Like, whether I see it on sand or on the grass, I get excited when I see Van Basten doing a scissor kick into the goal, or seeing Messi doing one, or Ronaldo doing one. I mean, it
Yeah.
lights you up as a fan, or as a footballer, or ex-footballer, whatever it is. You want to see more of it. So,
Yeah.
you know, I would say to kids or coaches, I said, take more risks, have fun with it. Big deal. And the essence of a shot is great, because even if you have a shot and you miss, you can't get counter-attacked too quickly, unless obviously the goalkeeper saves it and throws it.
Hmm.
It may end out for a goal kick. It may take a deflection. But, take more shots when the shot's available. If it's not available, okay, don't take the shot. But when it is available, take it, and don't fear whether it's going to go in or not, because most people who don't take the shots, it's more a mental block, because they fear the miss more than they do actually scoring. They say, "Oh, what if I take it and I miss? I'll better pass it to someone else who's a better
Looks so.
shooter."
I'll look so silly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at least have a go. It's like working all week and not getting paid. We all want to get paid for our work, and everyone playing the game should be entitled to make their own mind up, and have a shot, and be able to, uh, you know, um, do something for the team to win the game. Everyone should have that feeling. There's no better feeling than when you put that ball in the back of the net.
None.
I can't think of any other better feeling when you're playing football. Obviously, there are, winning championships and the rest, but the moment you score a goal, it's the adrenaline kicking through your body is incredible.
It's the universal like thing of just ecstasy. It's just like you just
Yeah,
can't. Everything, all of your uh energy just explodes when you're scoring that goal.
yeah,
Yeah. It. I totally agree. And I mean that's again like, why I've come to love beach soccer so much, because everything that you're talking about, the scissor kicks, the bike kicks. I mean, we had there it reminds me of a story as you were talking about this. We had our men's teams, from here in Northern California. We were playing games amongst ourselves, and there was a guy that came down to watch. He had never seen beach soccer before, and he was a huge, you know, English League, Premier League, you know, avid watcher, like spent every weekend watching it. And he was just simply blown away by the very things that you're talking about. He's like, I see maybe 2 bike kicks a season in a whole Premier season. And today I've seen at least 18 to 20 bike kicks. And I think 9 of them were scored for goals. He's just like, this is amazing. This, I don't understand why I didn't know about this sooner. And those sort of things kind of like, you know, get the adrenaline running, because you just start thinking about all the great goals that you do see when you're out there. And Modger, who's this little figure right here.
Okay,
he's a Portuguese player, and he's probably the one that you were seeing when you were talking about like the goalkeeper throwing.
Yeah,
he's the king of it. You know, his connection with his goalkeepers over the years and being able to strike balls first time out of the air and score goals. With he's a lefty as well, and he'd run down that right flank and ball would get played, and he would just score these incredible goals that even if you're playing or coaching, in this case, we were coaching against him at one point in the World Cup, and you just, all you could do was smile. I mean, it was just like, wow, that's talent. That's amazing.
Well, that's the gentleman that I think I was watching one time, and the goalkeeper threw it, and when the ball's coming from the literally from the other goal backwards, and then to do a scissor kick and get power at the same time, like literally, is the most sublime timing I've ever seen on the ball. I mean, that's as good as any best player in the world.
Yeah.
For that particular kick, obviously he's not an outfield player, and you know he's not a Maradona, Messi, or Ronaldo. But you know what? That when you watch
for
that
beach soccer, he is.
Well, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. And I think he should be recognized. If any soccer player or footballer saw that, they would know that, you know, this guy is magical, you know, or what he does. For me, it's like, yeah, do another one. I want to see how you do it. Like, I was hopeless at scissor kicks. You know, I mean, I played for my country. I played, you know, I did my best, whatever I could do. Like, I knew how to kick a ball. I could bend the ball. I can, you know, it was funny because I used to take a lot of free kicks. I used to score from 20, 30, even up to 40 yards out. And sometimes, you know, I have, you know, because it's difficult with penalties. Like some other player would say to me, oh, you know, I'll let me have a go at, you know, taking a penalty. I said, well, you know, when you're scoring from 30 or 35, it's probably easier from 10 or 11. But, you know, I shared around the penalties too. I didn't take everyone because penalties is a different mindset. You're expected to score, whereas free kicks, you're not really expected to score. But I put pressure on myself to score, if you know what I mean, because I knew exactly what I was doing. And I made a pact that I was really, really consistent with my kicking. But penalty kicking is more mental.
Yeah.
You know, it looks easy, but, you know,
it takes a certain mentality.
It does. You know, it's some guys talk about the best.
Some guys are smart, you know, like guys I've coached, like some of my best goal scorers, like on the field. When it came to saying, are you going to be someone that takes a penalty kick? They're like, no. Yeah. They may score lots of goals, but they're like, no, I don't do well with it. Yeah. You know, it's funny like that. It's a, like,
it's a mental thing. We always say which one's the best penalty. And the saying of some of my teammates was the one that goes in. It doesn't matter how it goes in, as long as it goes in.
Just get it in the net.
If you're winning 5-0, it doesn't matter. But when you're in a penalty shootout and you got 20,000 people screaming or carrying on that they want you to score, you've let 20,000 people down almost.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I mean, I played under Ferenc Puskas, who was inside the 3 best players in the world at that particular time. We're talking about 50s and 60s for a lot of the kids that don't know who he is. And he, as a coach, said to us, look, he goes, I played
You got coached by Puskas? You got coached by Puskas?
Yeah, Ferenc Puskas, yeah.
Wow.
And he said to us, he said, I missed a penalty in Olympic Games, World Cup, Champions League, normal playing for. He goes, I missed. He goes, everyone misses. Don't worry about it. He goes, you just get on with it and try your best the next one. So
Yeah.
once he sort of told us that, then you think to yourself, all right, I mean, Roberto Baggio, you could go on. Maradona missed too. Everyone
Hmm.
misses.
I saw Maradona miss one in Buenos Aires, and
Yeah,
it was after the whole '94. He was playing for Boca, and one of the most memorable games I've ever seen because of just the atmosphere in the Bombonera. And he missed a penalty in the first half, and every fan in that stadium cursed him. I learned a lot of new words during that.
yeah,
But in the 90th minute, the game was tied, and he had this ridiculous angle that was just no way you could score. And he lifted this ball and bent it over a defender, over the goalkeeper, into the back post. He was like inside between the out like between the 6 and the 18 corners, but like closer to the 18 corner on
yeah,
his left. It just bent this ball, and at that stadium, everyone climbs up the fence and everything, and you know he scored, and everyone went from cursing him after missing that penalty to
yeah, yeah.
just pandemonium. And the game ended. The press came out, surrounded him, and all my friend said was just don't let go. If you lose me, you're gonna get killed.
Yeah.
It was that period of time in Argentina when there was a lot of riots in the stadiums and so on and so forth as well. So it was very memorable. But yeah, you miss a
Yeah,
penalty, you move on. You know,
yeah.
yeah, it's amazing. Well, hey,
But
we're
but
probably going to want to try and wrap
yeah,
this up here pretty soon, but I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about your company. Um, do you, I mean, I know that like, what I know of it, it's like, you've got things that you're building right now for online.
yeah,
You're looking actually to come back to the US, which is also partly what we want to help
yeah,
energize, let people know that you're available for
yeah.
hire. And could you talk a little bit more about your company
Yeah,
we'll,
look, I mean, I want. I've been to America twice. I think it's a great place. What I've been developing has taken 20 years of my life, 20 years of playing sport, playing professionally, and uh, I'd love to come back and work with some teams and whether it's academies or clubs. We're looking at helping MLS teams. MLS is growing rapidly. They're doing a great job. They're spending a lot of money on their clubs. They're
yeah,
taking it seriously. And, you know, one of those areas that they're going to need help in is in the technical area and in the finishing area, because most people can sort of play the game and tactically keep other teams out. But if you don't develop your players to be able to outscore the other team, you're never going to win a World Cup, or you're never going to be an outstanding. You have to outscore your opponents. And I've developed a system where I can teach anyone how to do it. Um, Obviously, we're looking at opportunities to come in there to work with people, whether it's through yourself or um, through any avenue. I do have a lot of people who are following me on social media, which is great, from America, and we try and give out as much information as we can to try and help parents and kids with their questions about what they should be doing in certain situations. But my website's footballfirst.com, www.footballfirst.com.au. You can see all the information there, and we look forward to. We're definitely going to come. I don't know when, with the COVID restrictions. As soon as
yeah,
we're allowed to sort of move, and I think it'd be great for everyone when the COVID restrictions are finished, hopefully, and then everyone's families are safe and well, and we can come and share some of the knowledge, and
get
I
back to
think
football.
get back to football and help people score more goals, which is what we do. So Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I hope that all the viewers, and nice to meet everyone and who's listening in. And like I said, if you want, if you need any assistance, I'm on the social media pages. We try and get across to as many people around the world as we can. But I'll really look forward to getting to the US sometime and helping you guys out in
Well,
some capacity.
yeah, we're looking forward to it as well. It'll be great to have you out here, and if anybody does want to reach out to Con and can't quite figure out what .com.au is, you can always
Yeah,
reach out to us at Pro Am Beach Soccer, and we'll make sure we make that connection for you. And Con, again, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Looking forward to seeing how things go and being able to host you here in the US at some point soon.
thanks, Ty.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
We'll talk. We'll bring it around again, and watch out for episode 7 coming.
Perfect.
And thank you again, and we'll see you in the States.